A very good evening, everybody. Welcome to this brand new episode of Voice of Healthcare Presents The Big Idea, which is our recent mini virtual interview series where we have been featuring leaders from all the walks of healthcare in this quick one-on-one Q&A style. This breezy, snackable show aims to bring to you all that is newsworthy and that is worthy to bring your attention from all the walks of healthcare. In this series, now we have done somewhere around 10 or 11 odd episodes today. We bring to you all the refreshing tip for those who want to stay updated in all the content in healthcare. Our leaders continue to empower you with a quick, refreshing tip and expert insights on disruptions, practices, and trends in the healthcare industry that are worth exploring and worth sharing. For today's episode, our guest today is Dr. Preet Pal Thakur. He is the founder of Glamyo Health and has a rich experience of healthcare and well as investment banking, and has previously worked with companies such as Fortis Healthcare, JP Morgan, and venture capital funds including Milestone Religare PE Fund, Asian Healthcare Fund, and Alchemy Venture Partners. Welcome so much, Dr. Preet Pal Thakur. It's a pleasure to have you with us on the show.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
Now, to begin today's round of discussions, as usual, I'd first like you to let our audience know that could you please share your journey from first being a doctor, then to an investment banker, and now finally to being an entrepreneur? Over to you.
That's a very interesting question, and I've been asked this question many times because the route or the career path that I have had is generally not the one which a medico typically follows, right? So, as you rightly said, I finished my med school in 2002, right? So, at that point in time, what I realized being a medico for 5 years in the med school was that it taught me many things. First of all, working under resource constraints, right? That was a big learning that I had in my med school, right? But equally, I realized that there are a lot of opportunities which are coming up on the corporate side of the healthcare. This is 2002, 3, 4 time frame. And at that point in time, the corporate healthcare in India was just opening up. And 99% of the doctors are actually, at that point in time, were in clinics, doing clinical practice. So I thought that since corporate healthcare is going to open up in a big manner, there is a first mover opportunity to be taken if somebody with medical skills can augment those medical skills with business managerial skills, then he or she can be well poised or a first mover in a category which is about to sort of come up in a big time in India. So that was the idea with which I wrote CAT that year, and it was an unprepared kind of a attempt at CAT. So I wrote CAT just after advice from some of my friends, and luckily I happened to get through the sort of a written test, and then group discussion, and then personal interviews, and finally I landed up in Indore, right? With an idea that I will most likely be suited for a corporate strategy kind of a role in either a healthcare company or in a pharmaceutical company. That was my going in hypothesis when I entered the B school. But as luck would have it, I mean, none of this actually played out, right? So when I went in there, I saw that there are far more interesting things in the corporate arena, which also started attracting me. And my first sort of a brush was not finance. My first sort of a crush or love, so to speak, as a career choice was branding. So I wanted to do branding because I was enamored by all these celebrities sort of appearing for ads, and my limited understanding of branding was that you work with Salman Khan, you work with because at that point in time I had done my summer internship with Coca-Cola, right? So my first enamor was with the glamour world of the country. So I started my summer internship with Coca-Cola, where I worked in Gurgaon office, and I realized that branding requires a lot of sales also. Right? You don't become a brand manager just like that, right? I mean, and then they asked me to do a lot of door-to-door selling, right? Which sort of shook me up, and I thought that, hey, this sales is something that I don't want to do. Then because I had left strategy, I had rejected strategy earlier. I had rejected marketing, branding. Now only finance was left as an option for me. So I started exploring finance in greater detail, right? And then it started making sense, because 2 plus 2 is always 4 in finance, right? In marketing, it is slightly how are you positioning, how are you sort of segmenting markets is more qualitative in nature, but not like real science. So I started liking finance more, and then I started my career post MBA with JP Morgan in the investment banking team, initially in New York, then in India. Then I moved to various private equity funds, and the path that I enjoyed the most was at a private equity fund. What I liked the most was that you get to meet people who are far more smarter than you, right? So a fund actually funds founders, right? And the founders are the ones who are trying to change the status quo, the way in which the current sort of a methodology of doing business or doing activities or doing sort of a corporate way of life, right? So you'll always get to meet smarter people than you, right? So that is something that actually attracted me, and I made a career in private equity VC investing for roughly 10 years before co-founding this company along with one of my friends. To answer your question, the part that I enjoyed the most was venture capital journey, wherein you get to meet lot of smart people who are far more smarter than what you are, right? So in a room present with founders, I used to be the least smart person, right? I mean, so that actually made you learn many things, right? You get to know many perspectives. So I think that piece of my journey is what I enjoyed most. Currently, what I'm doing is also very sort of enjoyable in the manner that the impact that it is creating. But in my past lives, I've enjoyed my role as a VC investor.
Thanks for that, Dr. Thakur. And while you mentioned about your journey to being an entrepreneur finally, could you also let us know how exactly did you come up with the idea of setting up Glamyo Health at the first place?
Right. After having spent 10 years in private equity investing and having met roughly 1,200 to 1,300 healthcare sort of founders or entrepreneurs, you get a very ringside kind of a view of healthcare ecosystem in the country, right? You are able to appreciate what are the sort of portions of value chain which are currently being served in a manner which is either suboptimal or can be done in a much better sort of a way, right? Then, because I was a private equity VC investor for 10 years, that also ingrained in me certain business sense, right? That if you are solving a problem, then how do you create a sustainable sort of a business out of it, right? Because you can solve a problem by doing charity, but then that is not a repeatable or a sustainable sort of an act, right? So the balance is to solve the problem also and create a sustainable business also, so that it remains for years to come and it starts impacting the lives of the patients. So that was the thought process with which I started looking at which areas of healthcare are actually suboptimally served, right? And then within the healthcare, we found out that patient is currently facing many challenges when he has to undergo a treatment, or an elective or a surgical procedure, right? And most of these procedures are inevitable in everybody's life, right? Someday or the other, all of us have to undergo some minor or a major surgery in our lifetimes, right? This is not a choice that we have, that we can choose, right? We may choose not to buy a car, we may choose not to buy a bungalow, but we cannot choose not to consume healthcare, right? I mean, so that obviously we'll need to sort of do. So with this in mind, I think I started segmenting various portions of the healthcare value chain, right? And realized that if you have to create an impact, you have to first look at creating a sustainable business, right? Something which, while it may require money to scale in the beginning, but at some point in time in the near future, it should become capable of standing on its own feet rather than being dependent on external sources of funding. Right? So at that point in time, when in 2019, after having spent 10 years, I, along with my other co-founder, 𝗧𝗜𝗚𝗙 𝗕𝗜𝗚 whom I had known for 10 years, right, we started evaluating a lot of opportunities, right? Our key criteria were following, right, that the market should be large, that it should serve the needs of a large population, right? So then we saw that in healthcare, healthcare is a large enough market because 130, 140 crore odd people need to sort of consume healthcare at some point in their life, right? So the market was large. Within this market, we saw that what can we do? So there are various sort of sub-sectors of the market. OPD consultation or the first consultation is one subsector. Pharmacy is another subsector. Then fitness, wellness is third subsector. Then non-surgical intervention is fourth subsector. Surgical but elective or surgical but planned simpler surgeries was another sort of a subsector. So we realized that within these 5-6 subsegments, this market of planned surgeries or planned surgeries for non-critical causes, was a big market and had a lot of sort of inefficiencies as far as the patient experience was concerned, right? So that made us take a decision that why don't we solve for the patient in this subsegment. So our main idea of starting the business was to empower the patient in making the best possible decision for his planned surgery in terms of doctor and the hospital, and removing all the pain points that he was facing. So that was the idea with which we started Glamyo Health. And 2020, we raised a small seed round, but we were very lucky because COVID happened immediately after that, right? So because COVID happened immediately after that, that meant that we didn't have clarity as to when the next round of funding will come, right? So we had to become extremely nimble. We had to become extremely innovative. We had to become extremely lean in our sort of a spending, because we didn't know whether there was a next round of funding. So this is 2020 when Modi ji first put in first Janta lockdown. There was no visibility as to when it will end, right? And there was huge amount of panic in the world, right? I mean, so in that time frame, we and in hindsight, I can tell you that that was possibly the best thing that could have happened to us, because that helped us sort of create very, very nimble way of working rather than spending money. And having been an investor myself, I could see that when people have money or when companies have money, they start throwing money at the problems rather than solving the problems. They start sort of solving it by money, saying that, hey, why not if you need 5 resources, hire 5 because I have enough money in the bank, right? Rather than trying to see an automation or if a process engineering can solve that problem, right? So since we didn't have that luxury of that capital available to us, we solved each and every problem in the most optimal manner, which has helped us grow in a much more capital efficient way than we otherwise would have been.
Thank you, Dr. Thakur. And while we started with the fact that you have all these three tips of hats, an entrepreneur, an investment banker, and also a full-time doctor, I'm sure that you do really work hard in the fitness routine that you have. So please share your fitness routine with us, and how do you manage to balance your health and fitness in between all the work commitments that come up in your way?
Right. So a few things here, right? So when we started this, and I'll sort of take an example of why for every founder or co-founder or even the CXOs of a company, they need to have at least one activity which is stress relieving for them, right? I mean, so that one activity is their 1 hour or 2 hour in a day where they are away from the hustle and bustle of the corporate life or the startup life, and they can focus on themselves and have time to themselves, which helps them recharging their batteries for the sort of a tedious day ahead, right? So I would strongly sort of suggest that each one of us should have that one activity. It could be running, it could be playing a game, it could be dancing, it could be anything, right? I mean, anything that you sort of like, but it should involve, it can't be playing video games, right? I mean, so that's not a health sort of a focused activity. But I'm saying one should either play a game, go for running, somebody can go for trekking and all that stuff, right? Anything that. So for me, that activity is squash. I play squash every day. I wake up at 5:30 in the morning and then play squash for a couple of hours every day. Now that helps me in both physical sort of ways, and also helps me in recharging from the day-to-day sort of a hustle of the startup world, right? I mean, so in those 2 hours, I put my phone on mute, right? So I'm able to focus only on the game and only sort of spend de-stress, right? So I start my day with that. So I would strongly sort of suggest that any founders or the people who are working in the strategy levels at various startups, they need to develop at least one activity which is sort of which they follow religiously every day, and that helps them to de-stress.
Thank you, Dr. Thakur, for sharing. And we wish you all the best for all the future endeavors that you've marked up for Glamyo. We now are towards our last but not the least section of today's episode, the much anticipated big idea question for you. The big idea question for you would be, what would be your message for upcoming healthcare entrepreneurs who are looking to branch out in the healthcare insurance sector? And also specifically, if you could share a word for all the doctors who now admire to be healthcare entrepreneurs.
Now, for the healthcare entrepreneurs in general and healthcare entrepreneurs in the insurance sector, my core message to all the entrepreneurs is that keep the patient at the center of all your offerings, right? So we keep on saying that startups disrupt, right? What is the disruption that startup sort of brings in is that a startup rebalances the power in the ecosystem between various sub stakeholders in a manner that it ultimately benefits the consumer, which in this case is the patient, right? For example, when in 5-7 years ago, cab hailing was a big problem, right? We would at night these taxis would demand exorbitant pricing, and sometimes they would refuse, right? So what did Uber and Ola did? They rebalance the power of the ecosystem with the consumer being the ultimate beneficiary, right? So similarly, at Glamyo Health, what we are doing is that we, between the various stakeholders of, let's say, our doctors and a hospital and a patient and an insurance, we are rebalancing the power or rebalancing the inter subsegment relationship in a manner so that it starts benefiting the patient ultimately, right? So my suggestion to the entrepreneurs is that keep the patient at the center of your offerings, right? And then calculate backwards that whether the activities or the actions that my organization is going to take, is it benefiting the patients, right? If the answer to that is yes, right, so then your chances of succeeding are much higher. So that is one. The second one is a startup or any sort of a disruptor is as good as its people, right? So you need to focus more on hiring good quality people, and that is very, very important in the beginning phases of the company. So there, please don't feel shy of sharing ESOPs or equity in terms of hiring the good quality talent, right? Because that is the good quality people is the moat that will show in the execution, the way you are able to execute the business, right? So we've been fortunate to have a very, very sort of a dedicated core team that we've been able to create in the last 18-24 months. 3 COVID waves notwithstanding, we are now sort of present in 21 cities, helping thousands of patients in their surgical journey every month. Right, we've done more than 200,000 patient consultations till now. Right, so all this has been possible. It's not that I or my co-founder is doing this, right? I mean, so while we are there, right, but most of the time it is the team which is sort of doing this execution, right? So the second message for the founders would be that focus on building a very, very solid team. Third one is focus on building a tech piece much early in the journey, right? So these days, any sort of an offering by definition has a greater component of technology in it, because all our lives are now intertwined with technology, right? So as an entrepreneur, focus on having a good quality technology team in place at an early stage of your career, of your startup.
Thank you. And with that, we mark the conclusion of today's very interesting discussion. Thank you so much, Dr. Thakur, again, for sharing your views, your journeys with us, and also our viewers. Thank you to our viewers who have joined in for today's discussion. And I'm sure that you have been learning and getting inspired a lot from all the leaders that we feature and who share their journeys with us. To know more about it and to learn more about all the leaders from all the walks of healthcare, keep following all the updates for the big idea. Thank you so much.